right here, in front of everyone. Will you marry me?
Before she answers, Damon, you should know I own this airline.
Crescent Atlantic Flight 7 had been steady at 35,000 feet when the overhead speaker crackled. In seat 31C, Dr. Imani Brooks-Price sat with her hands folded over a charcoal sweater, dark slacks, flat shoes, no assistant, no expensive jewelry, only a plain wedding band and a small silver wing pin hidden beneath her collar. Walter Gaines, the maintenance supervisor beside her, lowered his magazine when a familiar voice filled the cabin. "Ladies and gentlemen," Damon Price said, "I've waited too long to say this." He stood near the business-class galley with the intercom in one hand. Claire Whitmore, still in uniform, waited beside him. Colin Mercer, the senior cabin attendant, had approved a brief proposal after Claire called it harmless. Damon did not begin with love. "For 11 years, I stood beside a woman who made me feel one step behind. Never successful enough, never important enough. Never quite the man in my own home." A few passengers shifted. Others smiled, expecting the story to turn sweet. Colin reached toward the intercom controls when Damon's speech turned personal. Claire caught his eye and gave a small shake of her head, and Colin allowed Damon to continue. Imani did not look up. Her thumb moved once over the edge of her ring. Damon never said her name. Tasha Price did it for him. She stepped into the aisle with her phone held upright, the live stream icon glowing. The camera turned toward 31C. "This is the woman who kept my brother trapped in a cold marriage for years," she told her viewers. A few passengers clapped before understanding what they were applauding. The sound faded. Damon faced Claire. "Today, in front of people who have no reason to lie to us, I'm choosing someone who makes me feel seen." He lowered himself to one knee. Claire covered her mouth. Her emotion was real. She looked at the ring as if it promised a safer life. "Yes," she whispered. Evelyn Price raised her voice from business class. "A man needs a woman who makes a room lighter, not one who makes everyone measure every word." It was how she had described Imani for years, without saying the ugliest part aloud. She criticized Imani's natural hair at formal dinners, her calm voice in wealthy rooms, the way she refused to make herself smaller for others. Tasha walked down the aisle and stopped beside 31C, holding the phone close enough for Imani to see her reflection. "Move the camera away from my seat," Imani said. Colin appeared. He glanced at Tasha, then turned to Imani. "Mom, I need you to remain calm. We don't want a private matter affecting the flight." Imani lifted her eyes. "I am seated. She is recording inches from my face. Whose behavior are you asking to change?" Colin's mouth tightened, but he gave no answer. Walter folded his magazine. "The woman sitting still is the only one you've told to calm down." Damon came through the curtain carrying a cream folder. He placed it on Imani's tray table. The top page read, "Petition for dissolution of marriage. Sign before we land," he said. "Don't turn this into another war." Imani opened the folder. Divorce terms. Confidentiality language. A waiver limiting her right to audit several business expenses. Then the clause beneath it. She would remain guarantor on Price Signature Travel's credit line for another 6 months. Damon watched her, certain public pressure would do what private conversations had not. Imani touched the silver wings beneath her collar, not for courage exactly, but for memory. Then she looked at the man she had once trusted with every fragile thing in her life. "You didn't bring me a divorce," she said. "You brought me your debt." Damon's smile disappeared. For the first time since taking the microphone, he had no answer. 2 hours before Damon placed those papers on her tray, Imani Brooks-Price entered Atlanta International Airport alone, carrying one black leather tote and a business-class boarding pass. She moved with the quiet focus of a woman entering a place she intended to study. That morning, Brooks Meridian Aviation Group had completed its purchase of 64% of Crescent Atlantic Airways, giving Imani controlling interest. Almost no one inside the airline knew it yet. The board planned to announce the deal in Seattle the following afternoon, after employees, regulators, and investors received the same verified statement. Until then, Imani was simply another passenger. That was exactly how she wanted it. Her legal travel documents still carried Brooks-Price, but professionally she had always used Brooks, the name she built beside her father. She had booked a business class seat, but before boarding she changed it to 31C. Lena Morgan, her chief operating officer, had questioned the decision. Imani gave her a simple answer. "I already know how they treat the chairwoman. I need to know how they treat the woman they don't recognize." At the priority gate, the scanner flashed green when Imani presented her phone. The agent looked at the screen, then at Imani, then back at the screen. "May I see your identification?" Imani handed it over. The agent studied the name longer than the machine had needed. "Are you traveling with a business-class passenger?" she asked. Imani held her gaze. "I am the business-class passenger." The agent's eyes moved over the plain sweater, the unbranded tote, the natural texture of Imani's hair. Nothing in that inspection was written into policy, but Imani knew the shape of it. She had met it in executive lounges, hotel check-ins, investor receptions, and conference rooms where people asked her assistant for the decision-maker while she stood beside them. The agent handed back the identification but pointed toward the baggage frame. "Your bag needs to be checked for size." Imani placed the tote inside. It fit easily. Seconds later, Tasha Price passed through the same lane, carrying a camera bag wider than Imani's and a structured handbag hanging from her shoulder. The agent smiled, scanned her pass, and waved her through. No second identification check, no baggage frame, no question about whom she was traveling with. Walter Gaines had been standing behind Imani with a technical magazine tucked under one arm. He stepped forward and held out his own identification. "You haven't asked to see mine again," he said. The agent stiffened. "Sir, we're only making sure the correct people enter the correct areas." Walter glanced at the green light still glowing on the scanner. The machine already did that. Imani did not argue. She opened a secure note on her phone and recorded the time, gate number, employee name, and the difference in treatment. Facts first. Feelings later. Her phone vibrated. Lena's message appeared, "Transaction complete. Board holding announcement until tomorrow noon. Service review remains active." A second file followed, sent through an anonymous employee channel Crescent Atlantic had almost forgotten existed. It contained summaries from black passengers who said their premium tickets had been checked repeatedly. Some had been asked whether the reservation belonged to an employer. Others had been told their names did not look familiar in first class. When they questioned the extra scrutiny, reports described them as difficult, agitated, or unwilling to cooperate. Imani read every page without changing expression. The problem was not one rude employee, it was a pattern hiding behind professional language. That was why she kept seat 31C. She wanted to see what happened when her title stayed off the table. When boarding began, Imani entered the aircraft and saw Damon near the front with Evelyn and Tasha. Her steps slowed, but only for a moment. Then Claire emerged from the galley. Imani recognized her immediately from messages that had lit Damon's phone months earlier, messages he had turned face down too quickly. She already knew about the affair. She did not know Claire would be working this flight. She did not know Damon had planned a proposal. She could have turned around. The cabin door was still open. One word to Lena could have moved her to another flight, another gate, another version of the day. She stayed. Not to catch Damon. That truth had already been caught. She stayed because she needed to see who he became when he believed the quiet black woman in the back had no title, no witnesses, and no power to change the ending. Before switching her phone to airplane mode, Imani received one final message from Lena. "If the situation becomes serious, send 4 words. Preserve the full record." Imani locked the screen and slipped the phone into her tote. A few hours later, those 4 words would force Crescent Atlantic to reopen hundreds of complaints it had once dismissed as misunderstandings. Long before seat 31C, Imani knew the sound of a tired engine. At 19, she spent most afternoons at Willow Creek Municipal Airfield, where her father, Elijah Brooks, repaired small aircraft in a hangar that smelled of oil. Elijah could hear a vibration and find the problem before the instruments confirmed it. Inspectors respected his records. His safety numbers were stronger than those of the larger company competing for Willow Creek's maintenance contract, and his proposal cost less. On paper, Elijah had won, but paper was not where the decision was made. The other company could not beat him on skill, so it changed the question. It stopped asking who did the best work and began asking who made customers feel comfortable. At a county meeting, one aircraft owner said he would feel safer with an established regional brand. Another warned that a black-owned operation might not match Willow Creek's polished image. A consultant praised Elijah's technical ability, then suggested he remain behind the scenes while someone else handled clients. No one wrote that his skin was the problem. They used cleaner words: fit, image, comfort, trust. Words soft enough to survive a meeting, sharp enough to take a man's future. The contract went to the larger company. Elijah returned to the hangar that evening and removed his gloves one finger at a time. Imani had expected anger. What she saw was quieter, a man studying the distance between proof and permission. "You did everything better," she said. Elijah looked at the contract file. Better work does not always defeat a story people want to believe. He did not teach her that hard work guaranteed fairness. He taught her something more useful. "Know your craft," he said. But skill alone is not enough. Build systems that do not let people replace evidence with their feelings. A few months later, Imani completed her first accelerated aviation engineering certificate. Elijah asked her to meet him at the hangar before sunrise. He opened an old metal box and took out a worn silver pin shaped like two wings. The edges had been rubbed smooth by years in his pocket. He fastened it near her collar and stepped back. Pride moved through his face. "Wings do not ask whether the person below deserves to be lifted," he said. "They do the work they were built to do." After losing the contract, Elijah could no longer chase his dream of building an airline. He changed the dream instead. On weekends, he opened the hangar to adults overlooked by technical schools, passed over for apprenticeships, or told they did not look like people trusted around aircraft. He taught inspection discipline, documentation, and the courage to ask for the written reason behind a decision. The hangar never became the company he imagined. It became a place where talent did not need the right face before anyone measured it. A few years later, Elijah died. The classes stopped. Dust settled over the benches. The county marked the property for sale. Imani returned alone and found his final safety report beneath a stack of logs. Every number was exact. Every correction was signed. No bitterness in the margins. Only work done properly until the last page. She placed the report beside the silver wings and made herself a promise. Not that the people who dismissed him would regret it. Regret was too small. "One day," she said into the empty hangar, "the Brooks name will stand over a system where no one has to prove their dignity before receiving service." Years later, hidden beneath her collar on Flight 788, the silver wings were not proof that Imani had money. They reminded her that power meant nothing if it only lifted the person holding it. Imani met Damon Price when she was 28 and still spending most evenings inside the old Willow Creek hangar. He was 31, working for a small travel company that booked corporate trips and family reunions. He had little money and no impressive title, but he noticed things. He remembered how she took her coffee. He brought dinner when she worked late. He never complained about the smell of machine oil on her clothes. On weekends, he sat beside her for hours, sorting Elijah's tools into labeled drawers while she decided which parts of the hangar could be saved. Damon was not pretending then. He loved her. After Elijah's death, the debts tied to Willow Creek became impossible to ignore. Imani had to sell a narrow section of the property to keep the county from taking all of it. The night she signed the papers, she sat on the hangar floor with the contract in her lap and stared at the empty workbench where her father used to stand. Damon lowered himself beside her. He did not tell her everything would be fine. He did not ask her to stop crying. He simply took the papers from her hands and said, "You do not have to be strong in front of me." Imani believed him because at that moment he was telling the truth. They married 3 years later. Their first apartment was small, their furniture second-hand, their plans larger than either of them could afford. Damon wanted to build a travel company of his own. Imani wanted to create an aviation consulting firm that measured safety, service, and hiring decisions by evidence instead of instinct. They spoke about those dreams like they belonged to both of them. 3 years into the marriage, Damon developed a medical condition that required surgery. Insurance covered most of the cost, but $18,000 remained. He tried to hide the final bill in a desk drawer. Imani found it. A week later, her wedding ring was gone. She had sold it to cover the balance. When Damon learned what she had done, he sat at the kitchen table and cried into both hands. "I will replace it," he promised. "When I make it, I will buy you something better." Imani touched his face. "Come home healthy, that is enough." For a while, gratitude made Damon gentler, then life moved forward. Imani founded Brooks Meridian. Damon opened Price Signature Travel. 2 years later, his company lost several major clients within 1 quarter. Payroll was due. The bank refused another unsecured extension. Imani signed a guarantee on a credit line worth $180,000. The company survived. Damon thanked her. He meant it. But gratitude can sour when it rests too close to shame. Brooks Meridian grew faster than anyone expected. Imani was invited to aviation conferences, investor meetings, and federal advisory panels. At business receptions, people often recognized Imani first and sometimes asked whether Damon worked for her. At one dinner, an investor listened to Damon's proposal, declined it, then turned to Imani and asked what she thought of the industry. Damon smiled through the rest of the evening. In the car, he said nothing. The next time he introduced her, he called her an aviation consultant. Imani looked at him, surprised. He kept talking as though he had not reduced the company she built to something smaller and safer for his pride. Damon did not hate her success at first. He hated the feeling of needing it. Evelyn knew exactly where to press. "You disappear beside her," she told him. She criticized Imani's natural hair before formal dinners and said certain guests might find it too political. She called Imani's silence intimidating. "People never know whether she is listening or judging them," Evelyn said. Claire, by contrast, laughed easily. She praised Damon's ideas before he finished explaining them. She called his company impressive. She made admiration feel effortless. Damon began coming home later. Then he stopped asking Imani about her work. Eventually, he blamed her for the distance he had created. When they separated, Imani asked for complete financial disclosure before signing anything. She needed to know what obligations still carried her name. Damon retold that request as control. He said she was using money to keep him trapped. He repeated the story to Evelyn, to Tasha, to Claire, and finally to himself. By the time he boarded Flight 7 and 8, Damon no longer believed he was deceiving the woman who had saved his health and his company. He believed he was reclaiming a life she had stolen. 3 days before Flight 7 unteed, Damon sat alone in the back office of Price Signature Travel, staring at an email from the bank. Once the divorce became final, the lender would review the company's credit line because Imani's guarantee might no longer remain in place. Without it, Damon would have to shrink the business, find an investor, or close major accounts until cash flow improved. He read the message 4 times. Each time it felt less like a financial review and more like a verdict on the life he had been presenting to everyone around him. His attorney sent a proposed agreement with one narrow option: a faster divorce, 6 more months of Imani's guarantee, time for Damon to restructure the company, and mutual privacy around the financial details. The warning beneath the draft was clear. Imani needed independent counsel. She should not sign under emotional pressure. Damon read it, then closed the email. He told himself 6 months was nothing to her. Brooks Meridian had grown large enough that she would barely notice the risk. He told himself he had given 11 years to the marriage and smiled through dinners where people remembered her name and forgot his. He told himself she owed him one clean exit. The more frightened he became, the more reasonable the plan sounded. He did not call it pressure. He called it closure. Tasha made it public. She did not know how much of Damon's company still depended on Imani's signature. She only knew the story he repeated. His wealthy wife kept him tied to her through contracts and delayed every attempt to move on. "Do it where she can't turn it into another private negotiation," Tasha said. "Let people see what you've been dealing with." The live stream was her idea. The proposal was Damon's. Imani's Seattle itinerary was still visible on the shared calendar used for their divorce meetings. Damon booked himself. Evelyn, and Tasha on the same flight, while Claire traded assignments with another attendant so she could work Flight 718. He did not know Imani had moved to 31C until Tasha saw her board. Claire knew even less. Damon told her the divorce terms had already been settled and Imani was delaying the final signature out of pride. He described the guarantee as shared marital support, not a personal obligation Imani could end. He said that once everything was signed, Price signature travel would expand, and the two of them could build a stable life together. Claire believed him because she needed the picture to be true. The ring did not mean luxury to her. It meant rent paid on time, fewer extra routes, and a life no longer one bill away from panic. When Damon knelt in business class, Claire was saying yes not only to him, but to the safety she believed he represented. Back in the cabin, Imani turned another page of the divorce packet. Her eyes moved over the guarantee clause, then the waiver limiting her right to question several business expenses. "Claire," Imani said, "does your future husband know his company is still operating because my signature stands behind its credit?" Damon answered before Claire could. "That is family money." Imani looked up at him. "The family you just announced was overthrew the public address system." Claire's fingers closed around the new ring. Damon took her hand. "It's a technicality," he said. "The business just needs time." Then he turned to Imani. 6 months. That's all I'm asking. You won't lose anything." Imani studied him until he looked away. "You are asking me to remain responsible for a company whose books you will not let me review." Damon's voice dropped. "You always make everything sound worse than it is." "No," she said. "I read what you put in writing." Claire looked from the papers to Damon. She remembered every promise about the life waiting after the divorce, every complaint that Imani used money to control him. Now she saw another possibility. Maybe Imani was not holding him back. Maybe she was the only reason he had not fallen. Damon squeezed Claire's hand and smiled quickly. "Once she signs, this is over." Claire looked down at the ring. For the first time, she wondered whether Damon had chosen her, or simply chosen someone more willing to believe the version of himself he needed to protect. After Damon returned to business class, Imani waited until the aisle cleared, then asked Walter to let her pass. She walked toward the rear lavatory without looking at the phone still following her. Inside, she locked the narrow door and placed both hands on the sink. The light above the mirror was cold and unforgiving. It showed the strain around her eyes, the careful set of her mouth, every small sign she had hidden from the cabin. Imani reached beneath her collar and removed the silver wings. They rested in her palm, worn smooth by her father's hands and then by her own. She did not cry because Damon had proposed to Claire. That betrayal had stopped being new months ago. She cried because she remembered the man Damon had once been, the man who sat beside her on the floor of the Willow Creek hangar after Elijah died. The man who held her oil-stained hands and told her, "You do not have to prove anything to me." She looked at the plain replacement band on her finger. The first ring had paid the part of Damon's surgery insurance left behind. He had once wept when he learned what she had done. Now he was using the second ring as evidence that she had trapped him. "I don't know when I lost you," she whispered. Through the thin door came Tasha's laughter, then Damon's voice, warm and wounded for the passengers gathered around him. He told them he had carried a heavy marriage for years. That sentence broke the last piece of control Imani had been protecting. Not because it was true, because he had taken every year she lifted him and rewritten it as a burden he had carried on his back. She closed her fingers around the wings until the metal pressed into her skin. Then she cried, her shoulders shaking as one hand covered her mouth. There was no audience, no board, no employee waiting for an answer. Only a wife mourning a man who was still alive. She let herself remain there until the tears slowed. Then she washed her face and looked into the mirror. "I can hurt as his wife," she said, "but I have to act as the person responsible for 36,000 employees and millions of passengers." Outside, Colin leaned toward another attendant near the rear galley. "She became emotionally unstable and locked herself in the lavatory," he said. Walter closed his magazine. "She asked to leave her seat and disturbed no one." Colin frowned. "Sir, you don't know what's happening privately. I know what happened in this cabin. Walter replied. You do not know what happened behind that door, so do not invent it in a report. When Imani returned, Collins stood beside 31C typing into his tablet. She caught the line before he turned the screen away. Passenger emotionally escalated following personal announcement. What action did you observe? She asked. Collins stiffened. I'm documenting the atmosphere. An atmosphere is not an action. Walter met Collins' eyes. A report should record what someone did, not what the writer imagined she might do. Damon was still walking between rows. Tasha was still broadcasting. Claire continued speaking with Damon while on duty. No one described them as disruptive. Maya Torres watched from the galley. When Imani adjusted her collar, the silver wings caught the cabin light. Maya recognized the design from a public aviation history profile she had studied before joining Crescent Atlantic. She did not assume. She opened the reservation system and checked seat 31C. The passenger's identity remained restricted, but an unfamiliar restricted service code appeared beside the booking. Maya looked again at Collins' report, then at Imani sitting with both hands visible in her lap. She went to the cockpit. I don't know exactly who she is, Maya told Captain Helen Cross, but I know our report does not match what is happening in the cabin. At 31C, Imani reconnected to the aircraft's Wi-Fi, unlocked her phone, and sent Lena Morgan a message. Preserve the full record. Flight 71, seat 31C. Lena acted immediately. The public address log, crew notes, internal messages, and time-stamped report were locked against later edits. No one would be able to clean the record after learning Imani's name. A few minutes later, Maya returned and bent near her seat. Dr. Brooks, she said softly, the captain wants to confirm whether you authorize the release of your identity. Damon heard her. He turned in the aisle. For the first time that day, he did not see the wife he believed he was leaving behind. He saw the edge of a life he had never cared enough to understand. Captain Helen Cross closed the cockpit door and called Crescent Atlantic Operations on the secure line. Brooks Meridian Aviation Group had completed its purchase of 64% of Crescent Atlantic that morning. The public announcement was scheduled for the next day. Dr. Imani Brooks was the founder, chair, and controlling voting member. Her presence on Flight 718 was part of a board-approved service review. The public address log showed that Claire had requested access by calling Damon's plan a brief proposal, leaving out that his legal wife was seated in the cabin. Collins' report described Imani as emotionally escalated, but listed no threat, raised voice, refusal, or physical action. Helen ended all personal use of the PA and ordered any filming that interfered with another passenger to stop. Tasha lowered the phone from Imani's face, though the live stream remained active. Damon leaned toward Claire. Brooks Meridian is her company, but that does not mean she controls this airline. Before Claire answered, several crew phones vibrated. Because the live stream was already spreading, Legal advanced the announcement and released it simultaneously to employees, investors, and the public. Brooks Meridian Aviation Group has completed acquisition of a controlling interest in Crescent Atlantic Airways. Claire stared at the logo, then at the silver wings on Imani's collar. Tasha's expression changed as comments raced upward. Brooks Meridian just bought this airline. The woman in 31C is Dr. Imani Brooks. Evelyn looked at Damon. You said she was only a consultant. She never told me she was buying Crescent Atlantic, he said. Walter looked up. Maybe she told you many times. Maybe you only heard the parts that let you feel larger. After Imani gave permission, Helen's voice came over the speaker. Ladies and gentlemen, we are addressing an incident involving unauthorized personal use of the public address system, filming used to pressure a passenger, and an inaccurate behavior report. Dr. Imani Brooks, chair of Brooks Meridian Aviation Group, is traveling with us today as part of an approved service review. No one was told to stand. No applause was invited. The silence did the work. Colin looked at the sentence he had typed. Claire looked at the ring on her hand. Tasha watched strangers replay the moment she pushed a camera toward 31C. Evelyn stared at the cabin she had used as proof that Imani did not belong. Damon looked at the unsigned packet. Colin approached Imani. Dr. Brooks, I did not know who you were. Imani met his eyes. If you needed to know who I was before describing my behavior accurately, then my identity was never the problem. She stood and walked toward business class. She placed the packet in front of Damon. You used an entire cabin to force me into signing what you were not brave enough to negotiate in private. Damon lowered his voice. I only wanted a chance to live independently. Imani opened the guarantee clause. Independence does not mean using someone else's assets to preserve your image. She slipped off her wedding band. I sold the first ring to save your life. She placed the second ring on the documents. I will not use this one to save you from the consequences of choices you made yourself. Claire looked at Damon. You said she was holding you with money. It is more complicated than that, he said. Would you still marry me if she stopped guaranteeing your company? Damon opened his mouth, then closed it. Claire removed the engagement ring and placed it beside Imani's band. 2 rings, 2 women, 1 man with no clean version of the story left to tell. Imani returned to 31C. She did not take a business class seat. She did not need a different chair to prove where she belonged. Flight 71E touched down in Seattle beneath a gray afternoon sky. No one applauded. The wheels met the runway, the engines reversed, and the cabin remained quiet, as if every passenger understood the story had not ended when the aircraft reached the ground. At the arrival gate, a small team from Human Resources, Legal Affairs, and the Flight Attendants Union waited beside the jet bridge. No security officers, no public dismissals. No one was dragged away for the satisfaction of a crowd. Crew members were directed to separate interview rooms, while passengers, family members, and other witnesses were invited to provide individual statements without hearing anyone else's version first. Because Lena had preserved the full record before Imani's identity became known, the facts could not be cleaned up afterward. Claire's original request to use the public address system remained time-stamped. Colin's first report still contained the phrase emotionally escalated without naming a single threatening act. Time-stamped passenger videos and the preserved livestream showed how long Tasha had stood beside 31C when Imani asked her to move the camera, and how Colin responded. Claire later provided investigators with her message history voluntarily. Those messages showed that Damon had told her the divorce was nearly complete and had reminded her that the proposal needed to happen before landing. Tasha tried to delete the live stream from her account. It was too late. Passengers had saved copies. Viewers had recorded the screen. The video spread because the double standard was impossible to miss. Damon, Tasha, and Claire had been allowed to turn the cabin into a stage, while Imani was labeled emotionally unstable for asking to be left alone. The crew's tone changed only after her title became public. Crescent Atlantic's communications team drafted a headline for its response. Chairwoman conducts secret review and exposes service failure on her own airline. Imani read it once and pushed the page back across the table. I do not want this framed as a powerful woman catching employees, she said. I want it stated clearly that a passenger was treated unfairly before anyone knew her title. Later, Damon asked to speak with her privately. In a small conference room near baggage claim, he looked older than he had on the plane. The confidence he wore in business class had disappeared. Please do not end the guarantee immediately, he said. I gave 11 years to this marriage. That has to mean something. Imani studied him, not with anger now, but with the exhaustion that comes after a truth can no longer be avoided. It means something, she said. That is why I am not destroying your company. But 11 years does not give you permanent rights to my assets. She offered terms that were firm but fair. The guarantee would end after 30 days, as the existing agreement allowed. Damon could use that time to negotiate with the bank. Imani would take no ownership in Price Signature Travel and would not use her position to block him from working in aviation or tourism. She would cover 6 months of modest housing expenses while the divorce was completed. In return, every debt and obligation had to be disclosed. There would be no clause forcing her to remain silent about Flight 718. Damon looked at the table. Is there any chance for us? Imani's face softened, but her answer did not. You did not lose me today. You lost me each time you made my name smaller so yours could feel larger. Claire heard part of the conversation from the hallway. She finally understood that Damon's proposal had not been built on a future they owned. It had been built on credit secured by another woman. When Damon approached her, she stepped back. "You did not choose me," she said. "You chose how I made you feel about yourself." Claire agreed to cooperate fully. She admitted she had requested access to the PA without giving Colin the complete situation. She did not blame poverty, fear, or Damon for the choice she had made. None of that earned immediate forgiveness. It was simply the first honest thing she had done. Still insisted, the matter should have remained private to protect the family. Walter heard her and turned. "Your family put it on a microphone," he said. "You only wanted privacy after the audience stopped taking your side." Evelyn opened her mouth, then closed it. For once, silence did not protect her. It left her alone with what she had helped create. 4 months after Flight 7 Wayne, the people who had filled that cabin with noise were learning what silence could require. Price Signature Travel did not collapse, though Damon sometimes wondered whether a clean collapse would have been easier. He sold the glass-walled office, cut the private car service and expensive client gifts, and moved the company into a smaller suite above a printing business. Damon began meeting customers himself. He listened when they complained. He reviewed invoices he had once left for Imani to question, correct, or quietly pay. A small investor agreed to help only after Damon disclosed every debt he had hidden behind optimistic projections. For the first time, the company had to survive without Imani standing behind it like an invisible wall. Damon also began seeing a counselor. At first, he spoke about humiliation, betrayal, and the way the world had always compared him to his wife. Eventually, the counselor asked a question he could not escape. Why had being helped felt more unbearable than hurting the person who helped him? Damon wrote to Imani several times. The first 3 letters defended him in different ways, and Imani answered none of them. In the 4th, he finally wrote, "I called your support control because admitting I needed you made me ashamed." She read the sentence twice, then folded the letter away. His honesty mattered. It did not restore the marriage. Growth was not a ticket back into the life of the person he had wounded. It was simply the work required to stop wounding others. Claire remained grounded during the investigation, which confirmed that she had misrepresented the PA request, left her post, and failed to stop Tasha's pressure campaign. Because she cooperated, had no prior violations, and had not known what the divorce packet contained, she was allowed to return on probation. During her return-to-duty training, she spoke without asking anyone to excuse her. "I thought growing up without security gave me the right to grab any exit I could find," she said. "I forgot my way out could not be built on another person's humiliation." She never contacted Damon again. Tasha's first apology was less honest. She spoke about lost sponsorships, cruel comments, and the damage to her career. Imani did not respond. A few weeks later, Tasha deleted it. Her second video contained no mention of followers or contracts. She admitted that she had turned a black woman's pain into content, read mocking comments aloud to increase engagement, and kept recording after Imani asked her to stop. She admitted the hardest part last. She only recognized Imani as someone worth protecting after discovering Imani had power. Evelyn took longer. Her house grew quiet without the family dinners where she had once explained why Imani did not fit. Damon began remembering her phrases one by one. "You disappear beside her. That hair does not belong at this kind of event. My friends never know how to speak around her. Claire knows how to make a man feel like a man." One evening Damon said, "You did not create my insecurity, but you gave it a voice." Evelyn understood then that she had taught her son to see a strong black woman as a threat instead of a partner. She wrote Imani a letter and asked for nothing in return. Maya received no sudden promotion. She entered a leadership program because she had verified the facts, reported an inconsistency, and protected a passenger before knowing whether that passenger had influence. Walter joined a small advisory group and refused to call himself an expert. "Write what a person did," he told them. "Do not write what you were afraid they might do." Imani asked for only 4 reforms. Reports had to describe specific behavior. Identification checks had to be applied equally. no confirmed seat could be taken to satisfy another passenger's status, and employees could report supervisors without retaliation. The review uncovered hundreds of similar complaints from black passengers who had been asked to prove more, then labeled difficult for asking why. The same review also found repeated cases in which black passengers were pressured to surrender confirmed premium seats for travelers considered more important. Imani looked around the boardroom and said, "Respect that appears only after you discover someone's power is not respect. It is fear of consequences." 14 months after Flight 718, the doors of the old Willow Creek hangar opened again. The rusted panels had been restored instead of replaced. Elijah Brooks's workbench remained beneath the eastern window, its scratches preserved under a clear finish. Above the entrance, new steel letters read Brooks, Aviation Skill Center. The center trained aircraft maintenance technicians, airport operations staff, safety managers, and service employees who wanted to move into technical careers. Many of the trainees had once been told they lacked the right background, the right education, or the right appearance for aviation. Here, their work would be measured before anyone measured the assumptions attached to them. Near Elijah's workbench stood a small glass case. Inside rested the original silver wings he had given Imani. There was no mention of Brooks Meridian's value, no record of the acquisition, and no list of titles beside her name. The plaque beneath the pin carried one sentence: Elijah Brooks believed skill should be measured by the work, and dignity should never require proof. Imani stood beside the case after the opening ceremony, watching visitors move through the hangar. She had returned the wings to the place where their meaning began. They were no longer something she needed to hide beneath her collar. A young trainee named Avery Collins waited near the tool cabinets. At 22, Avery had spent years handling baggage on night shifts while teaching herself aircraft systems. She had scored near the top of the center's entrance assessment, yet uncertainty still followed her into the room. "Dr. Brooks," Avery said, "how did you walk into an industry where people had already decided you did not belong?" Imani looked toward Elijah's old bench. Then she removed a small box from her jacket. Inside was a new pair of silver wings, made from the same design as her father's pin. She fastened them above Avery's name badge. "You do not wait for the room to agree," Imani said. "You prepare until your work can stand without permission. Then, you walk in and you hold the door for the person behind you." Avery touched the wings carefully, as if they carried more weight than the metal could explain. After the ceremony, Lena handed Imani an envelope. The return address belonged to Damon. It was his 5th letter, the first he had sent in months. This one was shorter. He did not ask for another chance. He did not describe himself as misunderstood. He wrote, "I used to think your silence meant you did not need me. Now I understand you were quiet, because you had grown used to carrying things I never cared enough to ask about." Imani read the line beneath the open hangar doors. For years she had wanted Damon to understand that truth, but understanding it did not erase what had happened. She folded the letter and placed it back in the envelope. She would not answer that day. Forgiveness did not require reopening the door. A few weeks later, Imani boarded another Crescent Atlantic flight. This time there was no secret evaluation, no board authorization, and no executive team following her trip. She chose an economy seat because it was the seat she wanted. No one in the crew recognized her. Before departure, a black woman stopped beside a window seat occupied by a man studying his phone. She checked her boarding pass and said, "Excuse me, I believe this is my seat." The man frowned and replied that he had already settled in. A flight attendant approached. Imani watched from 2 rows away. The attendant asked to see both boarding passes. She checked each one once, using the same tone and the same level of attention. Then she turned to the man. "Sir, your seat is in the row behind us. I'll show you where it is." No one asked the woman to move for the sake of peace. No one questioned whether the reservation belonged to her. No one described her voice as threatening, but because she had spoken clearly. The man gathered his bag, and the attendant helped him locate the correct row. The moment passed without applause, cameras, or a speech. It was ordinary. That was what made it matter. Imani looked through the window as the aircraft climbed. The wing lifted every person in the cabin at once. It did not ask who sat in first class. It did not ask who owned shares, carried a title, or knew the right name. It simply performed the work it had been built to do. Imani touched the new Brooks Aviation Skills Center pin at her collar and allowed herself a small smile. Power could make people learn your name. Dignity was revealed in how they treated you before that name meant anything to them. If Imani's story stayed with you, like the video and subscribe for more stories like this. Which moment affected you most, and where are you watching from?